Hi, my name is Bill Conway, and welcome to the Sons of Issachar podcast. The actions of the U.S. government, and in particular President Donald Trump, in May of 2025, have demonstrated the fragility and volatility of world economics. It's been interesting, if not downright scary, to see how dependent national financial systems, stock markets, and investments are on major players such as the U.S. president. Years ago, when I was considering stock market investment, a good friend counseled me to be careful. In particular, he said, "Bill, you've got to understand, stock markets are largely ruled by the emotions of the investors." That became very clear to me when the U.S. applied import tariffs on virtually every nation on the globe. Stock markets worldwide washed off trillions of dollars within 24 hours of this announcement. Lo and behold, President Trump received pleas from a large number of nations, and as a result of that and the collapse and the sell-off in the bond market, he elected to put tariffs on hold for 90 days. With the exception of the U.S. trading partners, of course, to the north and south, Canada and Mexico. Show me the logic in that. Almost immediately, market rebound occurred, and gains are being made once again. But rather than discuss the U.S. financial and tariff strategy, I'd like to comment on what I believe are a couple of essential issues for Christians to understand in terms of biblical economic principles, that is, debt and hard currency. So let's talk about debt. Throughout the Bible, we are told familial, national, and international debt, as well as personal debt, are a scourge. They are to be avoided. Proverbs states it bluntly. It says, "The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." That's Proverbs 22, verse 7. So make no mistake, folks, debt is slavery. And in a world turned upside down, where credit, which is supposed to be a complimentary word, as in you're a credit to your team, is now a measurement of debt. The banks will allow you a certain amount of credit to purchase a home. The amount they will allow you to borrow, and thus enslave yourself to them. Some Christians who have a problem with God's law, which in itself is a contradiction, will say, "Bill, you're talking about the Old Testament principles that apply to Israel. This is the 21st century. Grow up." Well, besides the fact that Jesus confirmed God's law and told us that not the smallest amount of it would be done away with, Matthew 5, verse 18, consider the words of the Apostle Paul from the New Testament in his letter to the Romans. He says, "Owe no man anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." That's Romans 13, verse 8. "Owe no man anything," says the Apostle. Are the words of Paul to the 21st century Christian also irrelevant? Debt mortgages the future to consume in the present. I want to say that again. Debt mortgages the future in order to consume in the present. Debt is past and present bound. It is not future oriented, and it negates two inherently biblical principles of wealth creation, thrift, and savings. The biblical model for wealth creation is the application of personal industry, thrift in household management, and savings for the future. This calls for a sacrifice in the short term to build for the long term, to develop a heritage to pass on to the next generation. Secondly, we must address the nature of money itself, the medium of exchange. Now, I still have in my possession a few 25-cent notes printed by the Dominion of Canada. That's what they look like. They were printed on January the 2nd, 1900, 125 years ago. What makes them unique is what is printed on the front of the bill. It says, "We'll pay the bearer on demand." What's so significant about that? Well, when those notes were printed, they were backed by gold bullion reserves held by the Bank of Canada. In other words, notes bearing those words were redeemable in actual gold bullion, provided you had enough of them. In other words, the currency, the bills used in the marketplace in Canada at that time, were anchored in something real, something of value, and most importantly, something that would stave off inflation. The government's ability to create inflation was curtailed because currency represented real wealth in terms of gold or silver metal. In his book Larceny in the Heart, The Economics of Satan and the Inflationary State, R.J. Rushdoony provides a wonderful example out of history of this very principle, of how even during the reign of Henry VIII, the state began to introduce inflation by devaluing real currency. He writes, "Debt and inflation are closely related and interwoven. Inflation means a cheapening of money. This has been done in a variety of ways throughout history. Clipping coins, that is, diminishing their size in order to have more gold for spending, is an ancient method. Another is debasing the coinage using baser metals exclusively or lowering the gold or silver content. Some coinage was merely washed in gold or silver to give it a deceptive appearance. Henry VIII's coinage was so made. And the first point to wear was the nose on the image, and he became known as Old Copper Nose." Unquote. The bills you have in your wallet or purse, unless you've gone completely digital, no longer bear the words, "We'll pay the bearer on demand." They read, "This note is legal tender." Currency is no longer backed by gold, and it is not exchangeable for gold except through the marketplace. So what makes these bills legal tender? Answer: the governments say so. The state says that the dollar is a dollar. Trust us. We're the government, and we're here to help you. And because the state controls the currency, they also control the printing presses that manufacture the currency. That's one of the primary reasons that the Hershey chocolate bar I bought when I was a little boy and cost me 10 cents now costs me $2 or more. The value of the chocolate bar has not increased. Rather, the currency has been devalued by state debt creation and its inflationary currency. I can remember days when gold bullion could be purchased for $40 an ounce. Now it's almost $3,000 an ounce in Australian dollars. The difference isn't because we have less gold now. In fact, we have vast amounts of gold, and more is being discovered, mined, refined, and minted all the time. The gold price reflects a true currency of true value. Australian, Canadian, American dollars, and all the currencies of the world are fiat currency. That which the state declares them to be, and thus legal tender. Does anyone actually believe the incalculable amount of international debt will ever be repaid? Nations can't even begin to keep up with the interest payments, let alone consider the principal. Truly, the debtor is slave to the lender. Short of declaring a year of jubilee, where all international debt is canceled out and we have the opportunity to start over with true money based in precious metals, we're consigned to building a house of cards. Perhaps you believe what I believe. Perhaps you think that God is not mocked, that while he is a God of mercy and of compassion and of love, he is also a God of justice and of judgment. Quite a number of Christian leaders are warning of the Great Reset, where the tower of debt is no longer self-supporting and nations are called to account. I strongly believe this will come. I don't know if it will be in my lifetime, but I think it's prudent to be aware and to take action, to prepare. So what is my sage advice in the face of these twin monsters of debt and fiat currency? Well, practically speaking, I would say, if you have a mortgage, do whatever you can to pay it off quickly. Parents, grandparents, think about and begin plans for housing your kids and your grandkids, either through your own investments or in your own home with you. If you are able to invest, do so in real creation commodities, like real estate and arable land. Develop a savings plan and commit to building it sacrificially. Be industrious, work intelligently, and always ensure a Sabbath rest. Tithe. This is the Lord's tax, and it's on the first fruits of our labors. Be faithful to him. Lastly, I know now that if I had invested my superannuation funds in gold when I first considered that back in 1996, it would have paid superior dividends now. Gold bullion or minted coins will always be of value, not only as an investment, but also as a medium of exchange. To conclude, I'd like to comment on a few issues close to home for us. We've built a colossal mansion on a sandbar, haven't we? We've got huge problems with obesity, unsustainable lifestyles, promiscuity and sexual addiction, alcohol and drug use, and much of it because we've believed the myth of something for nothing. The genocide of Rwanda continues, but there's McDonald's down the street, and that demands my attention. What I'm driving is that you and I can complain and wring our hands at how we have been enslaved by an ungodly economic system. Robber barons in banks and corporations, unpayable multi-generational debt, and currency that continues to buy less and less at the grocery store. But is there also larceny in our own hearts? Have you been one to rejoice at the idea of how you've been paying off debts with dollars that are actually worth less? And that is somehow a win? My mother and stepfather had one big trip in their retirement to Scotland. Other than that, they stayed home in their retirement home and entertained their children and their grandchildren. No yachts, no motorhomes, no world cruise. Were they impoverished? Nope. They valued us, their family, until the day they passed on. Folks, our heritage is not in what we accumulate. It's in what we pass on to our children and grandchildren. It might be monetary, or it might not. Our heritage is the confidence that our God will preserve us and our family to be a godly influence for the future. We simply need to be found faithful to Him and to His Word. Blessed are they who make the Lord their heritage. God bless. Thanks for listening.